Welcome back, scholars, to our Digital Academy. I am Professor Spark. Whether we are turning the pages of a timeless novel, our mission remains the same. Will today's sweep us into the concert hall? Let's find out together.
Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving right into what honestly might just be the original psychological thriller. I'm talking about Nathaniel Hawthorne's 1850 masterwork, The Scarlet Letter. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this is just some dusty, boring old story about Puritans, well, think again. This is a relentlessly intense, urgently relevant look at the incredibly toxic nature of public shaming, social stigma, and the court of public opinion. At its core, it's a story that asks a really profound question. What actually happens when the law tries to police the human heart? So let's jump right into the central question Hawthorne is throwing at us right out of the gate. Is it worse to face public humiliation, where literally the whole world knows your absolute worst mistake? Or is it worse to carry secret guilt, where you maintain this flawless public reputation, but you are completely rotting on the inside? You see, this isn't just a philosophical debate. It's the dual-track psychological arc that drives our entire narrative. But to really understand the incredibly high stakes of this choice, we kind of have to look at the world these characters are living in. Hawthorne wrote this in 1850, right? But he said it 2 centuries earlier, in the suffocatingly rigid Puritan society of 17th century Boston. This was a society absolutely obsessed with strict religious discipline, social conformity, and brutal communal punishment. Here's a quick, wild fact from our sources. Hawthorne's own ancestors actually participated in the Salem witch trials, so he knew a thing or two about America's dark legacy of religious intolerance and moral absolutism. In this world, a private sin is treated as a massive public crime. Okay, let's get into Section 1, the anatomy of a scandal. The story kicks off with a literal door swinging open to reveal a punishment that changes absolutely everything. Hester Prynne emerges from a prison holding her infant daughter, Pearl. She's been convicted of adultery, and her punishment? She's forced to wear this brightly embroidered scarlet letter A for adulteress on her chest for the rest of her life. And she is pressured relentlessly to name the father of her child, but she absolutely refuses. Now here is where Hawthorne sets up this incredible juxtaposition. The secret father is Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale, who just happens to be the colony's most beloved minister. Hester faces the music, owns her reality, and over time actually begins to grow stronger and more resilient. Meanwhile, Reverend Dimmesdale is publicly worshipped as this model of perfection, but internally, he is completely consumed by unbearable guilt. His hidden sin is literally destroying his physical and mental health. And just when you think the tension can't get any tighter, we enter Section 2, the architecture of revenge. Soon after Hester's public disgrace, her long-lost husband unexpectedly rolls into Boston. He figures out exactly what's happened, assumes a fake name, Roger Chillingworth, and slowly, methodically infiltrates Reverend Dimmesdale's life as a physician. Hawthorne basically treats these 3 characters like psychological case studies in a hierarchy of immorality. Just look at the progression here. You have Hester, whose sin was born of passion. She takes her punishment, and it results in resilience. Then you have Dimmesdale, whose sin is compounded by total deception and hypocrisy. The result there is devastating psychological decay. But then you have Chillingworth. His sin isn't some accident of passion. It is deliberate, calculated, spiritual cruelty. He literally feeds emotionally on Dimmesdale's suffering. Hawthorne makes a radical argument here. Chillingworth's hidden hatred and almost satanic obsession with revenge is actually a far greater sin than the adultery that started the whole shebang. Which brings us to Section 3, Symbols of the Soul. We're shifting now from the literal plot to the brilliant, shifting symbols Hawthorne uses. Because in Hawthorne's world, meaning is never permanently fixed. A label given by society doesn't have to be the final word. The crucial point here is how Hester actively changes the narrative of her own life. That scarlet A starts out meaning adulteress. It's a badge of total disgrace. But Hester rebuilds her life through relentless charity, hard work, and just this quiet dignity. Over the years, the townspeople's perception actually shifts. The A comes to mean Abel, then, to some, angel. Finally, it becomes a mark of acceptance. She transforms from an isolated outcast into a highly respected community figure. She literally rewrites the symbol that was meant to destroy her. And then, of course, we have her daughter, Pearl. She is such a fascinating character because she's a realistic, somewhat wild child, but she's also this massive walking symbol. She is the living consequence of passion. She represents innocence, nature, and the undeniable truth that simply cannot be swept under the rug. Her unusual, completely unpredictable behavior acts like a mirror, constantly forcing Hester, and especially Dimmesdale, to confront the hidden reality of their past. She's simultaneously a punishment and a blessing. Hawthorne also uses locations as these incredibly powerful symbols. The rigid town of Boston is a place of strict rules, conformity, and deep hypocrisy, where people judge each other purely on appearances. But the forest? The forest represents nature, freedom, and emotional authenticity. It's really the only place where the masks can finally be taken off. In fact, it's deep in the forest where Hester and Dimmesdale secretly meet years later and hatch this desperate plan to escape to Europe to begin a new life. And for a brief moment, sunlight actually shines on them. But as we know, you can't outrun the truth forever. This takes us to Section 4, the final reckoning. The climax of this story is an absolute masterclass in staging, where the architecture of the town itself serves as the ultimate platform for truth. Let's map out Dimmesdale's agonizing journey toward liberation through the 3 key appearances of the public scaffold. First, it's the site of Hester's daytime public shame at the very beginning of the novel. Second, years later, Dimmesdale stands on it alone in a secret midnight vigil, completely paralyzed by fear. And finally, stage 3. On Election Day, after delivering the greatest sermon of his life to this adoring crowd, he shocks everyone. He climbs the public scaffold in the broad daylight, confesses his sin, calls Hester and Pearl up with him, and finally tears away the hidden burden he's carried for all those years. The aftermath of this confession is swift and it's profound. Dimmesdale finally achieves redemption through his honesty and immediately dies peacefully in Hester's arms. Secrecy was killing him, but the truth finally set him free. Meanwhile, Chillingworth, who is suddenly deprived of his victim, rapidly declines. He literally withers away and dies within a year, though surprisingly, he leaves all his wealth to Pearl. Pearl, now fully integrated into human society because the truth is out, moves to Europe and lives a very prosperous life. But Hester? This is the most amazing part. Hester eventually returns to Boston. She voluntarily puts the Scarlet Letter back on, not as a punishment, but as an integral part of her own identity. She spends her remaining days as a trusted counselor for women who are suffering under the harsh expectations of society. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, a timeless moral reckoning. You might be wondering, why are we still talking about this 175-year-old novel today? It's because Hawthorne's exploration of shame, identity, and moral responsibility is arguably more relevant right now than it was in 1850. Think about it. Can a person outgrow a past mistake, or does society get to define them forever? Connect this to modern cancel culture, internet shaming, and how insanely quickly the public rushes to condemn people today. Hester Prynne is this enduring symbol of personal integrity because she looked at a society that tried to permanently brand her with her worst moment, and she simply refused to let them have the final say. She proved once and for all that compassion, honesty, and inner moral growth are infinitely stronger than public stigma. After her death, Hester is buried beside Dimmesdale. They share a single gravestone with a simple, haunting inscription. On a field, sable, the letter A, gules. It translates to a red letter A on a black background. You see, even in death, the symbol remains, but its meaning belongs entirely to them. And it leaves us to ponder this. In a world completely obsessed with judging the surface, how do we actually honor the enduring, messy, beautiful complexity of the human heart? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.